All right, so fluid intake and output. This is sort of the basics, like the ins and outs, conservation of matter. We can't just keep getting heavier all the time, so our input of fluid and our output of fluid has to be about the same. In the normal condition, this is where the fluid is going and coming from, right? So 2100 is about fluids ingested. Obviously, that can change dramatically according to the person. Then we have this from metabolism. One of the weird things about water, and we did talk about it early on, is that water is also a product of our metabolism, right? When we take oxygen and we use oxygen to burn carbohydrates, one of the products is H2O. So literally about 10% of the water in our bodies we made from, we basically stole it from the carbohydrates, okay, as part of our metabolism. Outputs, we have two insensibles. When we talk about insensible losses, we mean losses that are difficult to measure, okay? We lose water through the skin, we lose water through the lungs, okay? It's easy to see water loss in the lungs in the wintertime, right? You see the plume of mist coming out of everybody's face. Well, same thing happens in the skin, right? Our skin is remarkably watertight, but we do lose a little bit of fluid through our skin. These are heavily affected by environment, right? So if it's a very dry environment, these increase. Remember that cold is dry, okay? If that's a meteorology idea, but the colder the air, the less water it can hold. So like when it's minus 20 degrees outside, like it will do sometime this winter, your insensible losses actually increase because the air is so dry that it just slurps the fluid right out of you. Sweat, we lose a little. Feces, there is a small amount of water there. Urine is our big obvious output, right? So they match. Now this other column is interesting. It's not about intake and output. It's just showing you the massive difference that exercise can make in our body's needs, right? At heavy exercise, you're going to put out much more sweat, as much as 5 liters. Let's think about that for a minute, 5 liters of sweat, right? But yeah, you can make that much sweat in heavy exercise. So what it means is that depending on what you have your body doing, you're going to have to increase your fluid intake to account for that, right? It also that's proof of why heavy exercise without recovery fluids, you're going to end up quite dehydrated very quickly, right? Even to the point of getting into those homeostatic diagrams we were just talking about, Think about I like to give questions about rescuing a soldier from the desert, right? If you've literally been in the desert for 24 hours, you're going to be like 2 liters dry, so significantly shocky at that point. It's why people die in the desert. Okay, so the fluid compartments, as we talked about in PATH, readily exchange fluid with one another, except for a very specific spot in the kidney. All cells can move water very easily. Water moves through them very easily following the osmolar gradients. I like this diagram just because of how it sort of lays it out, right? Here's our plasma compartment, okay? So blood vessels. Intake and output you can kind of think of as going through the plasma, because everything that comes into the body comes in through the digestive tract, which is absorbed into the plasma, right? And then everything that leaves the body came out of the plasma. So our intake and output are both up here. Here's our capillary membrane separating plasma from interstitial fluid. And then between interstitial fluid and intracellular fluid, there's our cell membrane, right? So vessel, interstitial, intracellular. The lymphatic system we talked about the other day effectively connects the interstitial fluid compartment with the plasma fluid compartment, right? Now there's lymph nodes in that path, filtering as they go, right? But in the end, that fluid's going to end up dumping back in to the plasma. So when we add materials to the plasma, which is what we do almost all the time, those materials, if they can move, they will move between the other compartments.